I wasn't really schooled on what I could expect, and I think that speaks volumes to my obstetrician. The only thing good about my obstetrician was that she gave me my son. That's about it. I did not have a good experience with her. I'll discuss that in a later vlog. So the last thing that you guys remember when I vlogged before I gave birth was that I was nervous about the C-section, but I was already mentally prepared to have one because West was stubborn and he didn't want to flip. We had known for a while that if he hadn't turned, that we would have been scheduled for a C-section on 9/11. So I go to the hospital 5 o'clock in the morning. They check the baby and he's head up. So they're now prepping me for surgery. It took them about 30 minutes to find a vein because I was just so swollen. That already was getting me nervous because it took them way longer than it should have. And so I'm thinking I'm already late for surgery or whatever the case was. In this vlog, I'm also going to talk about things that they don't warn you about when it comes to C-sections, that they don't give you a heads up on. You basically walk yourself into the operating room. They don't put you on a bed. You're not already knocked out. In fact, you're never really knocked out for a C-section. So I'm literally walking into the OR, the bright lights, you see all the people, like it was kind of freaky in that way, like you're almost willingly trying to die. So you get yourself on the bed and you're meeting all these people. They're stating who they are, and I meet the anesthesiologist. She's telling me, I'm giving you the Spark Notes version of this because obviously details will take too long. She's telling me that I need to be very still. I have to arch my back kind of like a cat, and that I have to like push into her as opposed to like moving away where she'd, you know, probably miss or whatever the case is. And I'm freaking out because this is a spinal block. This is way stronger than the epidural because you're literally going completely numb from the waist down. So I was very nervous about that, to the point that they had to keep taking my blood pressure because I was way too anxious and my blood pressure was clearly very elevated. So eventually I calmed down. Dave is not with me at this time. He wasn't allowed to be there for me while they're prepping me for surgery. They stick the catheter in there. She gives me the medication, and immediately my butt, I can't feel my butt. They swing my legs over onto the bed, and she's like, okay, we're gonna prep you. We're gonna put the catheter in. The curtain goes up, and now I'm still freaking out because I still feel my toes, and I feel like they're moving me, and I feel like tugging and pulling and all these weird things. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm all open. My guts and intestines are all over the floor, but I can feel my toes. So I'm like, hey ma'am, what's going on with my feet, right? And she's like, don't worry, that's normally the last thing that you feel, but you're not gonna feel anything in between. Eventually I just feel a lot of movement down there, and they allow Dave to walk in, but I hear them tell Dave, you can look if you want, but I suggest you walk straight towards your wife, like on the other side of the curtain. And he's like freaking out because he didn't want to look. And he comes to my side where my head is. And I'm like hyperventilating here because not only is the anesthesiologist there and he's there, but the curtain ends up being way higher than I expected it to be. So I'm feeling very claustrophobic. And the curtain is almost kind of like dipping in front of my face. So I'm like wishing I had space, and I didn't. And then they wanted to put the warm blanket on me because you end up getting cold or shivering or whatever because of the drugs. I was like, no, I don't want that, because I literally felt like I was up to here in just stuff. And I started feeling like I was getting really, really stressed. They're working, they're moving, they're doing stuff. And Dave is playing my worship playlist that I had made prior to getting to the hospital, and that was the only thing that calmed me. Dave was trying to, like, you know, touch my hair and like caress my face, and although I didn't tell him to stop because I knew that was his way of trying to be there for me, it wasn't helping. But what was helping was the music that was playing and the song that was playing. Here's what they don't tell you about C-section. The drugs keep you from feeling pain, but it doesn't keep you from feeling sensations. So think of it like when you get a tooth pulled out, the Novocaine or whatever drug that they put in, it numbs the pain. When they yank your tooth out, you're not in excruciating pain, but you feel the pressure, you feel the pulling, you feel the tugging, you know that your dentist is working in a specific area in your mouth. Now that's what happens with the C-section and whatever drugs they use to knock half your body out. You feel the sensations. It almost feels like they're running their fingers along your body, but you don't know that they're cutting into you. You don't know that they're flipping your stomach inside out. You don't know that they're pulling out your uterus and cutting into your uterus and removing a baby from your uterus and then closing your uterus and then tucking your uterus back in. Yeah, you don't feel any of that, but you do know that they're there. You do feel pulling and tugging. This boy was born 8.6 pounds and he got a head just like his daddy, right? I felt the pressure of him being pulled out, and it almost felt like someone was sitting on my stomach, and then all of a sudden they had gotten up from off of my stomach, because I felt like a release of pressure when they removed him. That's what they didn't tell me, that I was gonna feel sensation. I literally thought that I would be numb, like completely and utterly numb, but that's not true. You know that they're there, you feel lots of pressure, but you don't feel pain. So don't freak out about that. Eventually I see my baby boy. They peek him out from the side of the curtain, but then immediately they start to resuscitate him because he had intaken too much fluid while he was breech. I also found out that he had inhaled meconium, which is their version of basically poop. And I later learned that the reason why they poop in utero is if they're stressed. A nurse had asked me, like, were you freaking out? Were you okay during your C-section? Like, how were you feeling? And I was like, no, I did feel very anxious and I was nervous and my blood pressure was through the roof, and I wasn't really calm until they pulled him out. And of course, they allowed David to go with them as they brought him to the NICU. So I felt comfortable with Dave leaving me to check on the baby and then come back to me after they had settled him in the NICU. But they had said, like, that's normally what happens when the baby feels anxious. It's normally because you're anxious or you're stressed, and that normally tends to happen. So he was in the NICU for 2.5 days, almost 3 days, because they needed to remove as much fluid as they could from his body. They had him on oxygen tubes, feeding tubes, all that stuff, because his oxygen level wasn't where they wanted it to be, and his breathing was very sporadic. There wasn't really much continuity with his breathing for them to feel comfortable enough to take him off the tubes. So it was rough, because my plan was that I was going to give birth, and I might have not had skin to skin immediately. I kind of expected that, but I didn't expect to not be able to hold him for a full 24 hours. I wasn't able to touch him for way longer than I expected. And I know that there's women out there that I know, you know, personally, that have had their children in the NICU for days, weeks, months. And I only had him in the NICU for 2.5 to 3 days, and I wanted to die. So I can't even imagine. I'm sorry, I'm like getting emotional. I can't even imagine having to leave your baby, you know, in the hospital while you go home and try to live your life, try to go to sleep, try to eat, try to have a regular day while your child is still in the hospital, in the NICU for that, you know. So I'm grateful that I was able to leave the hospital with my baby on the 4th day. It was the hardest thing to see. There were times where I didn't even want to go to see him because I didn't want to see him the way he looked. And he was such a fighter, even from those moments where I would go see him, or where Dave would go see him and speak to him, and he would respond to Dave's voice, and he would try to take the tube out of his own mouth. Like, I couldn't be there to see that. And I truly feel that that also had to do with my struggle to breastfeed, because I didn't have that immediate connection with my son. I wasn't able to latch him on to my chest as immediately as I had planned. And they were feeding him through a tube, and they were giving him formula. So that was already like another barrier, another hurdle that I was gonna have to fight past in order to successfully feed my son the way I wanted to, the way I intended to. I told many people this when they asked me about my story. They make you get off of the recovery bed and onto the hospital bed by yourself. They want you to move your legs. They want you to stand up. They want you to move, because the faster you move, the quicker your recovery will be. And as much as it hurt to do that, it did make a difference when I got up out of bed. The gas pain that would crawl all the way up to the back of my neck was even more excruciating than the pain of the incision, to be 1,000% honest. When you have surgery, your body is, open to the air, and then when they close you up and they stitch you back together, air does get trapped inside of your body. And so the only way for that air to come out is with time and with movement. It took weeks for me to feel like I could sleep, and the pain would make me cry at night. Like, it was that bad. I wasn't sleeping just because of the pain alone. And of course the incision hurts too, and they're constantly checking on it. Like, when they come in to give you your next round of medications, they want to see the incision. They want to make sure it's not bleeding, or it's not like getting infected or whatever. So they're coming in, they're checking, and they press down on your abdomen to see that your uterus is shrinking. So that hurts just as much as the pain from the gas did, because like they're literally like, they're not pressing on the wound, of course, they're pressing above it by your belly button area, but they're pressing down. Would I do it again? Yes, if I had to. Absolutely, I would do it again. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to dive deeper into it. Right now, I feel like my brain is all over the place, so I might not even be like telling the story, or I'm probably just forgetting to say things that I wanted to mention. Like I shared before in my other vlog, I had a birth plan. I just ended up throwing it out because obviously nothing went according to my plan. But like I said before, it was an opportunity to trust God with what he was trying to do. It was still an incredible experience, regardless of whether it went the way I wanted it to or it didn't. It was still an amazing opportunity and an amazing experience for me and for David. We had so many people praying with us, especially when we told them about the baby being in the NICU. I believe it was part of our process that we needed to remember that we needed to rely on God, and that we needed to rely on the encouragement of the people that he had put in our circle and put in our corner. And I believe that if we hadn't gone through what we went through, if our birth story was any different, we wouldn't have been able to be grateful for just the miracle of life and the miracle of what God does. Oh, I have one more thing to say. I didn't labor at all. So I think I understand why moms plan their C-sections. The recovery of a C-section is disgusting. I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, and there were moms there that were like crying and shrieking in pain, and I was there with my pillow just like falling asleep waiting for them to call my name. So I didn't labor. I did have Braxton Hicks contractions, but I had been feeling those for like months already. But I hadn't felt any severe pain. I didn't have my water break. My mucus plug didn't fall out. Like, nothing like that. I didn't experience anything like that. That's another cool tidbit on having a planned C-section. I'm just grateful that I have an audience to share this with.